program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I'm your host, Sarah Higdon. This is Transform to Freedom. So, I guess it's Merry Christmas Eve. So this wonderful Monday, if you celebrate Christmas, I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. If you don't, I believe Hanukkah starts this week too. So if you celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah as well. So we got a couple things we're going to talk about today. Kind of the same stuff as we talk about. If you've been watching the news lately, there's actually been quite a bit that's happened this week, which is kind of nuts. But before I kind of get into it, make sure if you didn't see, I released a separate video last Wednesday. It was about, actually, what was that video about? No, I released a video last Wednesday, off schedule, and you should go check that out after the show is over, because I think I'm going to start doing a little bit more of those shows, but this is the last show of the year. I'm not going to have a show. I don't think I'm going to have a show next Monday. We'll see. I'm going to take some time off in January, but yeah, as we're so we'll see. But make sure you follow me across all social media platforms, because that's where I will be hanging out for the entire time while I'm off, and you can see all my stuff over there as well. If you're on YouTube, I know we talked about it last time. I'm not planning to go anywhere anytime soon. The show is still going to continue the way it has been. Interestingly enough, my last few videos have been fully monetized, so there's not been an issue there. So that's been good. I haven't gotten any new copyright strikes or something just from reading the news, so that's positive. But let's kind of get into it. You know, we like to start off the show with some of the news from the past, some updates on what we've talked about. And if you see, you'll see this was a big enough one for me to even put into the title itself. So if you haven't seen, this week the Biden administration withdrew its proposal to change Title IX. So if you remember earlier this year, the Biden administration proposed changes to Title IX that essentially took into account gender identity rather than sex. I mean, it says sex, but then gender identity is mixed up in there. So you can't discriminate based off of gender identity. But the problem is gender identity is not, there's no definition for it, right? And so one of the things that was very much held up in there is that it would have allowed males to compete in female sports, which, you know, what the heck is going on with that? Okay, which, you know, we're very much against on this show. But it would have allowed males to compete in female sports. It actually would have forced schools to allow males to compete in female sports and not be allowed to do anything about it. The change to this is good. They made it seem like they listened to all those that submitted surveys and everything like that. I don't think that's what it was. I think the Biden administration lost the election, realized that the gig was up. Like, there's no reason for them to continue to push for this when the rules are going to change in the next week. So better to withdraw the criteria and not take the loss, essentially, and then do this, right? Ooh, Lorenzo. So perfect to watch while I'm baking cookies. Oh, that sounds so good. I want cookies. I saw some cookies at the store, and I was like, I should buy those. I actually have my hot chocolate, so we're drinking hot chocolate tonight. So, but cookies sound really good, especially with the hot chocolate. So, so the withdraw to the athletics department says, this is annoying me. Numerous commenters express, so yeah, opposed to the wait, okay. So here's what it says. This is gonna annoy the crap out of me if that keeps popping up. So it said it had reviewed all the considered comments that were submitted. Yes. During the comment period, with some commenters expressing general support for the proposed regulations, while others asked the department to modify proposed regulations to provide for more students to participate on a sex-separate athletic team consistent with their gender identity, particularly at elementary and secondary school levels, when those biological advantages would start to come into play. Yet other commenters opposed the proposed regulations in its entirety and asked the department to withdraw the athletics NPRM. Numerous commenters expressed the concerns about applications of the proposed regulations and participation, urging that the proposed regulation was unclear or too complex for recipients to implement, and many commenters offered alternative regulatory text for the department to consider to clarify, simplify, elaborate on, or substantially change the focus of the impact of the rule. Like I said, the department says it recognizes that there are multiple pending lawsuits related to the application of Title IX in its context of gender identity, including, oh my God, this thing keeps messing me up. Let me see. So the department says that it recognizes that there are multiple pending lawsuits related to the application of Title IX in the context of gender identity, including lawsuits related to Title IX's application to athletic eligibility criteria and the variety of factual context in light of comments received in those various pending court cases. The department has determined not to regulate on this issue at the time. So yeah, like I said, I don't believe. Hi, Mishka. Welcome in. Like I said, I don't believe that this was just the Biden. I think the Biden administration was fully on board to say that we I think that they realize there's no reason to go down this road when the Trump administration won the White House and this is going to get turned around. It's going to get flipped in the next less than a month, right? So I think that the Trump administration will enforce Title IX as it was originally intended, which means no more males competing in female sports. That is how it is written. There's no discrimination based on sex in Title IX, especially we talked about it even last week in terms of scholarships and actually that is what the my video was on. So Title IX forces schools to maintain the same amount of scholarships for male and female athletes. So revoking this and so by allowing males to take female scholarships, then that is a complete affront to Title IX, and it should have never been allowed in the first place. And so now we're seeing finally some good news. And like I said, I mean, we just keep winning and winning and winning. And so we'll see what continues to happen down this road. But this is a good news. And I don't think, like I said, it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have made any difference if this had been going, but this was actually because it was the Biden administration who had done it. It makes it makes a lot more sense. It makes it easier for the Trump administration to hit the ground running when he gets on when he takes office January 20th. Now, speaking about this though, I do want to caution, right? Because here's what I've been noticing. I've been noticing a lot of people online speaking about the way that, all of this woke ends come January 20th, right? And I would actually say that the fight is really just beginning. Because there is not a ton that Donald Trump can actually do, or even the federal government can actually do in a lot of these areas. Most of the situations that we have are state issues, and I really think that a lot of people are setting themselves up to be disappointed in how much power the president doesn't actually have. I mean, the president can only issue. I mean, the president's executive orders are limited in scope, right? He doesn't have like a vast array of power. I mean, that's why we have Congress. Congress has the power to pass laws and to make rules. The president just has enough power to modify those rules in certain ways, and that you have to be very careful with the way that these executive orders are. That's why there's lawyers and lawyers and lawyers that write these things up, and they're written in certain ways. It's like we talked about with like Nancy Mace's bathroom stuff. There is only one way that you can write that type of bill, and you can only do it for so the federal government only has the power to do it for federal buildings and federal installations. There is no way to implement a ban when the police forces don't fall under the federal government, that fall under state and local governments. And even on top of that, it requires 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything other than some financial stuff in the reconciliation. So other than reconciliation bills, which only require 50% vote, which is all financial stuff, the Senate only requires 60 votes. Or the Senate requires 60 votes out of 100 to pass just about any piece of legislation. That means that 7 Democrats will have to cross the aisle to vote for issues that conservatives want. This is why I say that anything we want to get passed, budgets, different bills, in so many different ways, it's still an uphill fight, right? Because there's only so much. I mean, you have to negotiate and get 7 Democrats to come along with you. And what we know is that Democrats are very strict in the ideas that they will vote together fully. I believe that the Democrats in this Congress will be obstructionist. And on a lot of issues, the issues that I disagree with Trump on and a lot of different stuff, I think that there's I mean, I'm okay with some of it. I also and I'm not for passing bills just to then send them to the Supreme Court to see what's going to happen, whether they're constitutional or not. Every single person in Congress has a constitutional mandate to follow it, right? They take an oath to the Constitution to follow it. And so that would mean not passing unconstitutional bills that are unconstitutional, just to see if the Supreme Court sides with you. So, yeah, I think that there are a lot of people that are starting to set themselves up for disappointment. And now let's talk about and one of the reasons why I really started seeing that was all the people. I mean, like I said, I've seen a lot of people. Something happens, something woke happens, something with gender ideology, and somebody says, "Thank God this is going to be over with January 20th." It really doesn't work that way. I mean, it's not like this light switch hits and corporations stop using DEI even though we're winning that fight, or states automatically stop allowing kids to transition, or we automatically get like queer theory out of schools. All that stuff happens at the very local levels, and most, like in the school stuff, it all happens inside the local school boards. It takes that's why somebody like an organization like Moms for Liberty exists, because you have to take the school boards. The federal government doesn't have that much control. Each state actually has their own Department of Education that implements their own curriculum requirements. And they take guidance from the federal government, and the federal government has a sort of a top-down approach, but I think we would rather get rid of the Department of Education, but that also moves it to more of a local level and actually gives the federal government less power over what's being taught in schools. So there's this video from the Turning Point AmFest where Trump talks about ending trans insanity. So let's listen to it, and I want to discuss this a little bit.
With a stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the transgender lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation, get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school. And we will keep men out of women's sports. And that will likewise be done on day one. Should I do day one, day two, or day three? How about day one, right? Under the Trump administration, it will be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. Doesn't sound too complicated, does it?
All right. So let's go through this line by line, right? Because I already mentioned.
Stroke of my pen on day one, we're going to stop the trans.
We don't know what this actually
gender means. Lunacy. And I will sign executive orders to end child sexual mutilation.
Okay. So again, let's be realistic and to know what powers Trump has. I'm all for banning, not allowing children to transition. Obviously, I'm with that, but we have to be realistic about the powers that Trump actually has. Obviously, I've passed bills across the country for this. But what power does he have? He doesn't. I mean, you can't ban child transitions with the stroke of with an executive order in the first place. So there's really what he's talking about is he will sign an executive order, or he'll just have the Health and Human Services, so RFK Jr., say that children taking cross-sex hormones and having surgeries is not in line with the guidance of the federal health services, thus will not be paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. That's about as far as he can go in that area. Trump cannot ban childhood transitions unilaterally. And I want to talk about this because this too, and say the reason our federal government works the way it does is because it doesn't matter who's in office, they don't have the power to do this stuff, right? So if you think that Trump should have the unilateral power to do, basically enact his entire agenda, just think about that what the opposite of that is in what Joe Biden would have had the power to do with the stroke of his pen. So if you think, I mean, he had to go through, I mean, Joe Biden went through the long legal process to try to change Title IX. If he had the unilateral authority to do it, he would have just signed a piece of paper, right? I don't like giving the Democrats this power. And so it's the reason our federal government is set up in this way. As well, in order for them to even try to ban it, again, it would have to go to Congress, where 7 Democrats would have to go with Republicans on this. Unfortunately, I don't think that would be the case. Also, it would end up becoming a states' rights issue. So under the 10th Amendment, the federal government really can't enforce these laws because, like, California is a sanctuary state, right? The federal government can't come in and force California to ban these practices. They really can't. Like, the Constitution dictates that California can make these laws for children, which is awful. That we have to have this conversation, that this is even a conversation, but we have to set expectations to reality and what the federal government's powers actually are in this matter. And I think that's you're not going to have the federal government going down and going after doctors in California, right? The federal government just can't come in and ban stuff like that. So realistically, again, if you are sitting here thinking that Trump is going to come in and just ban this and we're finally done, the fight's finally over, I think you're sadly mistaken. The fight is just starting. We're still, I mean, this summer in legislative sessions, we're still going to be fighting at state governments across the country trying to get this stuff banned. It's the way that the system works. So I don't want people to get their hopes up too high that Trump's going to be able to come in and do all this stuff. And for those of us, I mean, those of us that have been around for a while, like, trust, I get being excited. I was excited before too. I moved away from the Republican Party because after being part of the Tea Party for so long, when the Tea Party, we got people elected to Congress, and then they didn't do what they end up going and passing these massive spending bills. We got them elected to Congress to cut spending, and they started passing these massive spending bills. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. See, Lizzie said, I think the insanity in California will have to be solved through a shit ton of lawsuits rather than Fed power. On the bright side, those lawsuits are starting to come out. Yeah, this is the one area where I think the federal government does have, Donald Trump being in charge is a positive thing where he can start to do some things. I mean, he can use the weight of the Justice Department to support these detransition lawsuits. Actually, this is one thing that he can do that would be really positive with the HHS, is starting to actually support detransitioners. That is one area where you can cut support for the transitions, but you can actually help support detransitioners in this manner. You can actually, with the HHS, they can start issuing guidance as to how to treat detransitioners, which have been largely ignored by the current administration. So that is one positive aspect as to what they can do. But I've said it time and time again that the lawsuits are what's going to be that changes this stuff, right? So the lawsuits are what's going to change it, because that is what's going to de-incentivize the doctors from being able to perform these procedures. That's what changes it. The lawsuits are the biggest thing. A lot of stuff doesn't. The federal government doesn't just. They don't have the power, and to be honest, it's just a good thing that they don't have the power, because you always have to think of what happens when that power is in the hands of the other side. So we continue the fight. We continue the fight that we've always fought, that we've been fighting. Now we do have the weight of the federal government and the president of the United States behind us, which is the exact opposite of what we had before. But it's still a long, difficult fight. And really, to be quite honest, Trump's administration, he's got 2 years. You have to recognize he has 2 years to really make a huge impact. Because historically, after an election like this, where we, one side controls the entirety of Congress and the executive branch, come the midterms, so in 2026, so in 2026, then you're going to have historically at least one chamber of Congress will flip to be Democrats, and then it becomes intensively harder. And honestly, our Congress right now, it is the least amount of leeway that we've ever seen in Congress. What is it? The House has literally 3 seats. So the Republicans have a 3-seat majority over the Democrats. That means if 3 Republicans flip or vote no, then the bill doesn't pass. And like I said, in the Senate, Republicans have a 54 or 53 seat majority in the Senate, which means that 7 Democrats are needed to help pass any piece of legislation that goes in front of them. As a libertarian, I think this is the best way to do it. I think this is a good setup. I think division is generally good, so that you're not just passing one side or the other, and we're not flip-flopping back and forth, which is why executive orders are not great either, because once the next Democrat gets into office, they just reverse what Trump does in office. So it just goes back and forth at the stroke of a pen. That's why legislation is needed in most situations. Let's continue with this though, because there's some other stuff. So here.
Get transgender out of the military and out of our elementary schools and middle schools and high school.
So what does that mean? So I think I understand what get them out of the military is. And yes, he has the power to, as the commander-in-chief, make the rules for the military along with the Secretary of Defense. He could kick out every person in the military, though he didn't last time. I think when he sees that the numbers are something like 15,000 trans military active duty, or like 15,000 people serving in the military that are trans, that reduces combat force by quite a bit in a time that we're already below pre-World War II levels. So I think that there will be restrictions, which I think are okay. I think that they will go back to the quote unquote trans military ban that he had the first time. So when in Trump's first administration, he didn't kick anybody out who was trans or taking cross-sex hormones or and whatnot, but he did limit it and say no transition. Like, so if you're already in, you're in, but we're not going to accept anybody new that's taking these medications and whatnot. But then he also said that you were allowed to be openly gender nonconforming, I'd say. And you could, whatever you did on your off time was your business, but you still had to meet your sex-based standards. I think that's more so. So it really wasn't a trans ban in and of itself. You just couldn't transition while you were in. But if you were already in and had already transitioned, then it's a different story. Not necessarily against that. I know a lot of, but I also know a lot of. I know some very highly decorated combat soldiers that are currently serving, and most of the time the people that are serving, it doesn't matter who you are, as long as you can do your job and get your job done. Nobody really cares. So we'll see what he's talking about there, and what the plan is with those numbers. Because we're gonna cut our readiness in half if he kicks people out. But I don't, like I said, I don't mind. It's a leader's nightmare to have somebody come in, have surgery. I wouldn't allow surgery for trans people. If I was in, I would say, well, no, because it takes you out of your job for, like, you if you have bottom surgery, you become undeployable for over a year, and you're not able to do your job. Like I said, if you can do your job and do it well, then that's fine. But if you can't deploy for over a year, then that's not good. You can't do your job. You can't even do PT. So you are literally just taking up a spot from somebody who could be there. So it's a nuanced situation. Now, when he says get them out of our elementary schools and high schools, I don't know. The only thing that I can think that he's talking about here is that he's saying that we need to, that I think he's talking about queer theory, getting queer theory out of schools, getting, gender ideology out of school. I don't think he's talking about actually trans people, because here's the thing. I mean, again, at the federal level, he has zero authority over hiring decisions from local schools. So he has zero, there's zero authority that they could say that a trans person could not be a teacher or work in a school. Zero authority. That's all. And honestly, it would probably violate the Civil Rights Act, if they even attempted at a local school to disallow somebody simply because they are trans. It would violate, and if they try to pass a law, it would violate the 14th Amendment. So I think, the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment. So I don't think that there's really much he can do there. And like I said earlier about like keeping queer theory out of schools, that goes down to the state's Department of Educations and down to the local school boards, whereas, yes, his Department of Education can direct curriculum in a certain way, but it really, they are just an advisory role over states, and states, the states, the state school boards, the state Department of Ed. So I don't know exactly how much he is going to be able to do in that regard, other than, like I said, direct from a powerful position as the president. Enforcement, not so much.
And we will keep men out of women's sports.
Well, that one's obvious. He can enforce Title IX, which is a good thing. Now, I will say, though, a caveat on that. The only power that the federal government has over sports is in school sports. So high school, like middle school, high school, and collegiate sports, the federal government, because of Title IX and because of federal funding, has the ability to control the rules within those sports. However, the federal government does not have the ability to tell, say, the LPGA, a private organization, what their rules might be. Now, again, the LPGA recently said no, which is a good thing, and that's what we fight for. But the federal government doesn't have the ability to tell the LPGA, the WNBA, even the Olympics Committee, right? So USA Olympics Committee is a private organization. The IOC is a private organization. It's an international Olympic body, but it's a private organization. Our federal government cannot tell private organizations what their rules on this matter are. That's why you're seeing every individual sports organization making their own rules. That's why the IOC actually kicked it to the individual international regulatory bodies for each individual sports. So like I said, caveat that. I think it's beneficial to note that this is strictly for, and again, how would you make a professional team if you're not competing at the college level or the high school college level? I mean, the good thing is they won't be taking scholarships away from female athletes anymore. And then we just fight the individual sports organizations as these things come up and to change their rules. Like, that's where the fight moves next, at least on the sports front, is to the individual. It allows people to focus specifically on individual sports leagues. And then the last thing he says is that the government policy will be that there's two genders, male and female, which those are sexes. I get it. We know what you're saying, but male and female are sexes, not genders. Which we use the terms on this show all the time. I use male and female for those reasons, because male and female have actual definitions, whereas they want to say that gender is a social construct, and nobody has and so you end up fighting over when you talk about stuff in gendered terms, you end up fighting over language more than you end up fighting, talking about what the actual issue is. So when we talk about male and female sports, if I said women's sports, well, trans people would say, the trans activists would say trans women are women, so they should be able to compete. And it's okay, we're just going to say the sex terms, the male and female. I'm not playing these language games. We're going to say what is fact, what is biological fact, and there are only two sexes, male and female. And I can sit here all day because we could sit here and argue about what is a woman all day and never even talk about the issue at hand, never even talk about sports once. That's what generally happens. That's why they use these terms. That's why they try to muddy the waters when it comes to these terms, is so that you end up arguing over the terms themselves and not the actual issue. But we're gonna so I'm with Trump on that last one, and all he's really saying is that the government will only recognize male and female, which is absolutely what we should be doing. Like, because the last administration would be, talking about non-binary. They actually had, remember the suitcase thief, non-binary suitcase thief, and they would entertain all these, these ideas and genders and 1,000 genders and all that stuff and all the nonsense. So at least I fully agree with him on this. But again, I think it's one of those things where we have to be careful. We have to understand how much power the federal government does not have. And when people say that woke ends on January 20th, I'm just wondering how much they actually mean that, what they mean by that, and how much they understand. Because I'm seeing it on both sides. And I'm seeing it from a lot of younger people on both sides that don't actually understand, that have not been around, haven't seen how government generally works. And so, and don't understand, like, because you see it from the left, the I've seen a lot on the left being like, after this speech, they're now looking. I saw some comments today from people like talking about fleeing red states, which, as we talked about, red states, it's a state level issue. I've worked with enough legislators to know that most of these things are not on the top of their radar. But it's a state by state issue, and they understand that. But then there's some people that are like talking about wanting to flee the country and get political asylum in Europe and stuff like that. And I'm just like, it's all hyperbole, and it seems like hyperbole on both sides. Like, the left has been fear-mongered so much that they're so afraid of a Trump administration that they don't, but it doesn't seem like they actually understand, again, how much power the federal government actually have and how much Trump is not a dictator, right? Trump is not a king. He doesn't have the power to, with the stroke of a pen, ban all this stuff. All he has the power to do is maybe make it so that the federal government doesn't have to pay for your treatment, for your medicines. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not in favor of the government paying for any meds. Start up a nonprofit that actually helps service trans people in that regard. You can do that. But I'm not in favor of government healthcare as a whole. So, but it comes down to it, like, think about this. I mean, think about the med situation. Think about it in the terms of a, almost even, you can think about it in a religious rights space, right? So a lot of people that are religious may not agree with people being allowed to take cross-sex hormones or have surgeries or any of this stuff, transition in general. And so they wouldn't want their tax money going to pay for it. Their tax money shouldn't go to pay for it if they are religiously opposed to it, right? You would think if you're religiously opposed to something, it's very similar. I mean, and now the trans debate is going to become very similar to the abortion debate, right? I mean, if Donald Trump could just sign away and say that you can no longer, like, people can no longer transition with the stroke of a pen, even minors, he would be able to do the same thing with abortion, but he can't. Congress has to pass the laws. Congress has to pass the bans. It's the same thing. But the thing is the federal government doesn't have to pay for it, especially when there's people that are religiously opposed to it. So it makes sense that I wouldn't want my tax money going towards stuff that I don't agree with. So I can see where this could be something that they could oppose. Yeah, see, Lizzie says, yeah, I help moderate a site with a lot of teen users, and so many of them were like, women's trans minority rights are over. Yeah, it's really sad how fear-mongered they are. It's like, you just look at some of you feel bad for people. I feel bad for people that are that scared over this. But again, maybe it is because I understand government at such a level. Like I said, it seems like everybody's arguing over this stuff. But when you've been around and you actually think clearly at a lot of this stuff and see what powers government has and doesn't have, which this is the thing, is we haven't taught our kids actual civics anymore. This generation doesn't understand civics as a whole, and it seems like it's on both sides. Don't understand civics as a whole, and so they think that the government is all powerful and can do stuff. I mean, the Biden administration really was not able to get a lot of stuff done. They could have tried to pass into law that a mandate for states. They could have tried to mandate that they allowed gender transitions for minors in their states, but they didn't have that power either. They could have mandated, if they wanted to, if they thought, I mean, because I would think the Biden administration would try it, but everything that California's passed, like all these laws that California's passed, the federal government could have tried to pass those things, but they don't have the power to do it. And so I guess people need. We're gonna watch and see. We're gonna wait and see what happens. But it's hard. And I mean, even this last week, I started realizing, even this last week, that nothing's gonna change. And maybe this was kind of a black pill moment for me, that I saw that not a lot is going to change from what I've seen through the Tea Party stuff and everything now. Well, let's just move to the House passing this massive spending bill last week. Now, there is some stuff that did change, but the Republican-controlled House passed a continuing resolution through March with so much pork in it, with so much spending in it, that it's unbelievable that a Republican passed House would do this. And then, so if you didn't see what happened, so last week, coming up to the federal government possibly closing down, there was a 1,500-page bill with tons of pork in it, and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and basically the entirety of X started coming out against this bill and highlighting all how bad it was, and that they brought it up at the last minute, how big it was, and this is just business as usual. And finally, Speaker Johnson pulls the bill because it's not going to pass. It's clearly not going to pass. The next day, he puts a bill out there that's 116 pages that ends up spending the exact same amount. The difference, though, is that it removed congressional pay raises, and then it still spent the same amount, and then it raised the debt ceiling, so it would have preempted the raising of the debt ceiling, which needs to be done by June. And Donald Trump ended up supporting this big spending bill, but it was killed because 38 Republicans from the House Freedom Caucus held to their principles, held to the standards that their constituents sent them sent them, and a lot of conservatives, even Donald Trump, were attacking some of these House Freedom Caucus members who were doing the right thing, who were doing what they've always done. I mean, Chip Roy has held since he's been in Congress that he will not vote to raise the debt ceiling unless there are significant cuts attached to it. He just won't. Thomas Massey's another one who has voted no on like every budget since he's been in the House. So I think it was a good thing that those stopped their spending, right? So like stop the spending bill. And then finally, Speaker Johnson goes and gets 100% vote in favor of the bill from Democrats. But before that, there had been an agreement to separate the bills and have single issue bills. And then he went back on that and ended up passing it with full Democrat support. So this was Vivek Ramaswamy on the first bill. He said it should die because it's it needs to be smaller and more streamlined federal government. And so like some of the things that they were talking about in there was paving the way for a new football stadium in DC. Like why is that the federal government's responsibility so that the Washington Commanders can have a football stadium in DC? And then you see the 38 Democrats, and these are all fiscally conservative Democrats. I'm happy to see my Republican, my my representative was on the list of people that voted against it, because they should have voted against it. They were they were voting how they should be voting. Like, again, I'm having flashbacks of the Tea Party movement. Like, just flashbacks of voting for people, getting them into elected office, and then then the spending continues to be business as usual. And spending is one of those things that Trump's first administration, he was not good on spending. He added $8 trillion to the debt, despite having record revenues after his tax cuts. So when you tell me he wants to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion, it basically means he wants to spend $5 trillion. And that's not a good thing. I don't support massive spending bills. But it was interesting to watch, right? So this was my take of it all. Watching people attack the House Freedom Caucus members, and then going after them when, instead of Speaker Johnson, when they went and got a bad bill. Like, they're like, oh, they incentivized Speaker Johnson to go get Democrat support. Like, that's how this works. No. Condemn Speaker Johnson for doing that. Like, condemn Speaker Johnson, who went and got Democrat support, rather than working with the 38 to pass a spending bill. Rather than working with his own members, he went to the Democrats. If they would have just kept the plan to pass single bills, they would have passed or failed, but at least it would have averted the government shutdown. Pass the single bills. Don't go straight to the Democrats to get these massive spending bills done. It's not the Republicans who stood in the way of massive spending bills. It's those who voted for it. And they started, like, a lot of these conservatives started making it seem like the 38 were for the final bill, and then when it switched, no, the 38 were against every single bill that came up. People like Dan Crenshaw was for every bill that came up. The people that were for that first bill, let's talk about them. Let's talk about people like Dan Crenshaw, who's going to vote for that first 1,500-page bill. Those are the people you want to get out of Congress. And this is what's going to happen. And so this was my take on it. And this is why I said it just makes you realize that nothing is going to change. Government's still going to continue to spend massively. We'll see it come March when we're having when we're having the fight. But this is what typically happens, and you can see these conservatives starting to set the stage for nothing changing. So I said earlier where I see too many people being too optimistic about what powers, but now we're talking about budget fights, and nothing is going to change. The government still, it seems, my black pill moment right now, and I'm usually very optimistic, is that nothing's going to change. So I said watching conservatives attack Freedom Caucus members is making me realize that nothing is going to change. They're setting the stage to pass more massive spending bills and then blame the small government members for not violating the promises to their constituents. Then, as Trump said, he's going to, he wants to primary Chip Roy for, again, Chip Roy does not work for Donald Trump. Chip Roy works for the people of Texas, his constituents. And so they're gonna work. So these people are gonna work to primary these Freedom Caucus members, and for the next primaries for them in 2 years, when inevitably Democrats will take control of Congress. Then they will be able to go back to their reckless spending under the guise of, we have to negotiate with Democrats to pass these bills. I don't understand why we're making enemies of Republicans so early, especially the ones who have consistently voted for small government principles. And is it like, are so many conservatives not fiscally conservative that it's like, if Trump says jump, how high? You say how high? If Trump says we're going to jump off the bridge and we're going to pass a $5 trillion spending bill, you're going to say let's do it. No, I don't think that's the way that we should be working. I think that these people, again, Congress people work for their constituents. Now, Trump has had that up and down relationship with Thomas Massie, right? I love Thomas Massie. Such a nice guy. If you've ever met him in person, he's a super awesome person, and he's a very principled person. But Trump had issues with Massie in his first term, and he tried to put up a primary opponent against Massie. Well, Massie won 75% of his district. You're not going to primary these people out of power. They are loved in their district. And because they stand for these, like they stand on principles in these ways, these are the type of people that you want in Congress, that are going to stand on their principles. The promises that they made to their constituents, they are upholding them. That's who we should want more of in Congress. It doesn't matter who's in power. We should want these people standing on principles every step of the way. And let's be clear, again, Trump doesn't have a very good record of sending candidates to Congress. Okay? When Trump's record was pretty low for the amount of people for who he endorsed in elections that ended up making it to Congress. And that's not to say that some of them won't, but I think that, again, people voted for Trump top ballot and voted for Democrats down ballot. Think about that. They voted for Democrats down ballot because they don't want Trump to have all this power. They don't want their representatives to go and vote 100% with Donald Trump. They may agree with Trump on a lot of different issues, but they still want that checks and balances system. But if we're playing team sports, we don't have checks and balances. So it just seems like, again, if we're going to try to continue to, they're going to try to primary these people, focus on primarying people that they don't like. And again, and it's just going to stall. Congress is going to stall for the next 2 years. Democrats are going to take control, and that's going to be stalled for 2 more years. And let's be clear, Donald Trump, again, has 2 years. Historically, the other side takes control in the midterms. And the margin of error right now is so small, it's hard to see that not happening. So something's got to give. Something's got to give, right? All right, let's see. Oh, yeah, we talked about Dan Crenshaw for a second. You're right. Who said it? Yeah, Dan Crenshaw is a complete snake. He basically voted to give, because of the TikTok ban, they voted to give Joe Biden the power to shut down basically any news site that dares challenge him. And look at this. Look what he says when asked about it.
Access to everything TikTok has, which means data on all Americans, and with data and with access to your app that you're addicted to, you can vastly manipulate an entire population, which the Chinese have done already.
Are you worried that our intelligence agencies are doing the same thing domestically?
Am I worried that I know that they're not?
They're not manipulating Americans. They're not controlling the flow of information.
Yeah. Did you have some evidence otherwise that you'd like to share?
I mean,
okay.
Before
any serious questions?
So ByteDance were to say.
Congressman, you asked for an example of the U.S. intelligence agencies meddling in our information. What about before the 2020 election, when 50 members came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation? Does that count?
No, because they were retired.
They were retired, but the FBI had the laptop for over a year.
There's nothing even close to a TikTok.
it's a great example. That is our intelligence agencies meddling within our elections because they said it was Russian disinformation, even though they knew it wasn't. They lied to the American people saying it was. Yeah, Mishka, Dan Crenshaw does wear an eye patch. We kind of call him Eye Patch McCain because he's just like John McCain in so many ways. But now he lost his eye. He lost his eye because I believe he was a Navy SEAL. So he lost it in combat. Just so you guys are aware, like that's not. Yeah, he wears an eye patch because he lost his eye in combat. So, but that's the thing. So, our intelligence agencies aren't doing it. So we're supposed to believe you? No, I don't believe you. In fact, I'm pretty sure Edward Snowden showed that our intelligence agencies are listening to us. They are manipulating. I mean, we do the same thing overseas. You don't think that they're manipulating our algorithms? They got bots all over, X and Twitter, or X and Instagram and Facebook and all these other sites. You don't think that our intelligence agencies are on there? I think that's, of course, we don't have evidence right now because they're intelligence. It's highly classified information if we do, but we do know that they did. What about during COVID? What about during the 2020 COVID when the U.S. government was directing Twitter to shut down information, directing Facebook to shut down information, shut down accounts, to ban accounts that dared to question the narrative? We know that our federal government has done this. Edward Snowden showed it when he released all the stuff and how they were spying against us and how the abuses of the FISA system were working, and yet he's still voting for the FISA warrants too. Dan Crenshaw's a snake that needs to get out, that needs to go. Like, go. And I think we have some people that are going to primary him, which is a good thing. He's one of the worst people in Congress. One of the worst. He's definitely the worst Republican. I mean, when he was going to vote for the first budget bill because he wanted that pay raise, and he was cursing at people on X. He was literally looked like he was having a hissy fit on Twitter because people were calling him out. He doesn't have the right temperament to be in Congress, and he needs to go. Like yesterday. Okay. We're running up to the top of the hour, but I think it's worth mentioning. Somehow, Texas Representative Kay Granger was found living in a memory care facility while she still remained in office. I want to know how this woman was able to, for 6 months, she didn't vote on any bills. She was in this care facility for 6 months until we just found out. Like, it's a dementia care facility. How is she still sitting in office? Why would you not resign your position? This is why I've constantly advocated for age limits. We have age minimums. Why don't we have age limits? And term limits would help too, but I'm more in favor of just age limits for everything. And term limits, okay. But I think age limits are easier to pass. She's 81 years old. She's been in office since 1997. But I do agree with Thomas Massey, who says, I'm more concerned about the congressmen who have dementia and are still voting, like Mitch McConnell, like the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, who passed away while in office, like Nancy Pelosi. I kind of agree with Thomas Massey on that one. I'm probably more worried if they're actually voting, but she's not. Like, her constituents should be pissed because she's not actually there representing them, right? But like, we knew, like, when John Fetterman had his issues, how do we not know that a congresswoman from Texas was just missing? Not able to cast a vote, just missing. even though she was in a dementia facility, didn't know where she was. Like, who's running her office? I think that's what it was. Is her staff was like, if we tell people, we're gonna have to get a new person in here, and we might lose our jobs. So let's not tell anybody. I don't know. Well, all right, y'all. That is the end of the hour. If you guys celebrate Christmas, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Actually, I'll just wish you all a Merry Christmas. Is it offensive? Like somebody wished me a Merry Christmas today, and I said, "Oh, you too." And she said, "Well, I don't celebrate Christmas." I said, "Oh yeah, happy Hanukkah." But I mean, it's not really offensive to tell people Merry Christmas if that's what you celebrate. If somebody told me Happy Hanukkah, I would say thank you. You too. I think it's just a nice gesture. So Merry Christmas. I hope y'all enjoy your family and friends and whatever you're doing. I'm still not sure, like I said at the beginning of the hour. I don't know if I'm gonna have a stream next week. So just check in watch into the community and see what happens. I might release I filmed a video about Disney last week, so we'll see if I can get that edited up. Maybe put that out on Friday, so you might have another extra video this week. Other than that, if you've made it this far, make sure you click that like, subscribe button. Follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.